board pulled up. Do I need to do that? Yeah.
I
I
believe
don't either have it pulled up.
Vicky,
Sorry.
you're
How do we do that?
Okay, so you're going to log out. Do you want me to send everybody the electronic school board link?
Yes,
Have you already
please.
done it once?
I just sent it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vicky, are we ready to begin?
Yes,
Wait
I
a
don't
minute.
see that Alicia has logged in, but Andy can let us know if she joins us. I will go ahead and start the meeting so everybody may join it.
Hang on. I am not there yet, Vicky. Hang on.
And Alicia is just joining us.
Okay, I will update attendance. Thank you, Andy.
Are we ready now? Is everybody logged in?
Yes, but I've lost my Zoom now. Hang on. See, Andy, we spoke too soon here.
Everybody can join the meeting. Alicia, your video is going in and out. There you
Uh-oh.
Ew, what is up with my video?
right.
Like a brick wall.
One of my children probably did something. Let me see if I can.
Oh, yeah.
If you can
If
find that
the
kid.
audio is working and we don't need to see the member, we could always turn off the camera.
Correct. I'm ready whenever you are, Buffy.
Okay. I will call the meeting to order at 7:33. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Adoption of the agenda. It is recommended the Board of Education adopt the agenda as submitted. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
please vote.
Amy, it's not recording your vote yet. There we go. Thank you.
Motion passed. Unfinished business, school reopening plans. We have the secondary grade comparison for 2021. Dr. Reich, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, we uploaded the grade comparison at semester end. Dr. Brown, feel free to chime in anywhere. Generally, the hybrid scores are comparable to last year's full in-person scores. The table 1, you can compare all learners this year to all learners last year, and the percentages are very close as far as comparisons go, but that's there for your review. We did meet with the health department yesterday. Numbers generally are trending better, and our community infection rate is about where it was last October when we had made a determination that we would return to full in person. So numbers are back to where they were at that time as far as community infection. I'll say just generally our staffing has been better. We have daily been able to cover, with a few exceptions, 100% of our staff absences with subs. So we've been close to 100% fill rate since the return after the break. And I think, if I may, I think the consideration here, I'd like to put it in perspective, because it's not really considering a full return versus hybrid. There's more to it. Really, the consideration here is, are we providing students what they need in the hybrid versus in terms of consistency and less disruption? Or would we be serving our students better if we had a full return with what we believe would be twice as many quarantines and the possibility of having to go full virtual if there are staffing shortages in buildings, similar to what we did at the high school before the break? So that's really the consideration. It's bringing our kids back is, I think, something all of us want. But we have to also consider the contact tracing implications and the disruption to learning that would cause as well in terms of quarantine. Having said that, I would say that the 10-day has helped. As you probably recall, we shifted from a 14-day quarantine to a 10-day quarantine as provided by the CDC. That has helped as well. So I think that's part of why we're seeing better staffing numbers. That's really where we are. The health department, they were generally positive. We talked a lot about the vaccination and the rollout, and the health department isn't getting very many doses. I don't know that this plays heavily into the decision that the board would have to make as far as reopening, but they're still vaccinating first responders and 90 years old and up. So they're not able to help a significant portion of the population, although they want to, and they're prepared to vaccinate more. But in talking with them about their approval of our return, they would be supportive if the board would like to bring our students back. So once we make a decision, whether it's today or at the regular board meeting or whenever this might be, unless, numbers and data changes substantially, the health department will support the decision of the board. So with that, I was thinking, Buffy, if you're okay with this, I would have Jay go over our district numbers to give the board an idea of where all of our numbers are.
Yes, please.
Okay, Dr. Harris, would you display our numbers? I don't know if you have the ability to do that, or if Andy has to give you the ability to do that.
Yeah, I think Andy can display our dashboard. So you can see from our dashboard, we've been tracking all of this information on a weekly basis, since beginning of the year. And, it covers our staff attendance. It reviews our current student attendance. It also displays our quarantine and positive test numbers, as well as the community transmission numbers from the health department and the Mid-America Regional Council. So as Dr. Reich mentioned, our numbers are trending in a better direction. We are probably at, since early October, at our lowest overall community transmission rate at 18.22%. It's still, as you can see, it's in the red. That's because the health department is, they desire that to be below 10%. It hasn't been below 10% since the last spring, but that's why it's still listed in red. But it is better than what we've had the previous several months. The teacher attendance rate is doing much better as well since the break. Our substitute fill rate, as Dr. Reich mentioned, student attendance has been pretty good over the last couple of weeks. We now have, we've had pockets of concerns where our attendance has dropped below, 90% into the 80s. And, that's when we really keep a careful eye on those buildings and those numbers. We've also had pockets of quarantine, and Dr. Butel can really share the buildings that have some of those bigger concerns over others. But we're monitoring those on a weekly basis. Overall, our quarantines are at probably one of our lowest percentages. But I do think we had a little spike here in a few buildings that Dr. Butel can probably share. But you can see from that chart, that's where we stand today as of this, the most recent data, and certainly would entertain any questions on that.
Dr. Harris, do you want to mention our bus driver staffing concerns?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have continued to struggle with is when we have staff members that are quarantined because of a close contact or a positive test. Certainly that's been the case in some regard from classroom teachers. Right now, those numbers are better, but from transportation side, that has been a challenge that we're still dealing with today. Is when we have quarantine drivers, making sure that we can fill our routes and provide a driver for every single route on a daily basis. So JT and his team have done a great job trying to manage that all year long, but it hasn't been easy, and they have some concerns. The more kids we put on those buses, the potential for that to happen on a more frequent basis is always there. And having substitute drivers on hand is a little more challenging than what it might be for other areas in our district. So that's something that we'll have to pay careful attention to if we do bring more kids back. But it is something that we're worried about and want to make sure we can manage that well.
Is the bus driver exposure, is it as they pass, or is it the entire time the student's on the bus?
Dr. Butel, do you want to answer that as you handle the contact tracing?
I'm sorry, Gary, could you clarify your question about when bus drivers are quarantined?
Right. Is there exposure time as a, is it accumulation of the child passing the bus driver, when he's within the 6 feet, or is it any time that student is on the bus?
So
Then
we have not had any situations to date where we have had to quarantine a bus driver because of on the bus exposure, or quarantine a student because of on the bus exposure to the bus driver. So our bus driver quarantines are from outside exposures.
So that wouldn't change. We wouldn't expect that rate to change whether we're full in person or not.
Well, right now we're able to maintain a buffer around that driver because of fewer students on the bus. So if we had students directly behind the bus driver that were positive, that would impact a quarantine for the driver.
So if we looked at the numbers on each buses, would that be every bus, half the buses?
Well, our elementary buses are already pretty full because those kiddos are all coming in. At the secondary level, I would really have to defer to JT on that.
Because our elementary levels won't change.
Right.
Given this,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would think it would primarily be middle school and freshmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of agree. I think the middle school and the high school buses wouldn't be as crowded probably.
Yeah, I mean, it would be helpful to know what that actually looks like, how many additional kids and how many of those seats would have to be used. Also, Dr. Harris, do we have an estimate, and I know it's just an estimate, but what the quarantine increase would look like if they were full in person? I mean, we see it with hybrid, but what do you expect when we go full, if we go full in person?
And are you referring to maybe in the building, the classroom impact?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe we have Dr. Butel has some information on that, because we essentially, we took our seating charts for classrooms on the A day and then combined those with the B day, so you could see the impact of how many kids that would, that would be in a close contact compared to what they are today. So I'll defer to Dr. Butel to share that.
So as we trace at the secondary level, our estimate is that our quarantines will double. When you look at how students are placed currently in the hybrid, we're able to not always get 6 feet even now, but we're impacting about half of the kids. So I made this little picture for you. And if you think about this in terms of a hybrid seating chart with the seats in red, maybe attending on A days, and the seats in white attending on B days. If we were to pick any one of these kiddos, say this red guy right here in the middle, if you were to contact trace that student, it is incredibly likely that at least 4 students would be impacted through exposure. Andy's pointing those out to you right now. So when you put all of the students in that classroom, you double that contact trace, because instead of just hitting the red around that student, you're also picking up the white. So that's definitely an impact. So the estimation is that that will double. When we compare our secondary contact trace numbers to our elementary contact trace numbers, we see for most elementary students around 7 to 12 kids in class getting picked up through a contact trace, depending on the services a student receives and how they move about the building. So if you think about that impact in one class, extrapolating that over the 7-period day would be a piece. We don't really think that there would be a huge increase for lunch because of the way that the students are seated. The tables aren't big enough to add a huge amount of more kids that will be within that 6 feet range. So our biggest areas to pick kids up in a contact trace are obviously the classroom. But we try to minimize that by creating those static seating charts. That's one of our mitigating measures.
And what would make the teacher quarantines increase if we go to full time?
So right now, the way the seating charts are laid out, the teachers are able to create those to protect themselves a little bit. So they're able to maintain that 6 feet distance for the most part. It doesn't always happen. We actually had a bit higher quarantine of teachers yesterday than we would like, but having difficulty, especially at the elementary level, keeping our staff 6 feet from those kiddos. When you have a full classroom, especially at the high school level, it is very difficult for the teacher to teach and be 6 feet from the students just because of the square footage in some of our classrooms. So right now, our secondary teachers who are quarantined from student contact are most often quarantined because of small group instruction or providing direct intervention. They're not generally quarantined for teaching the whole class because they're able to maintain that distance.
Right, and that part would be the same in either scenario. If you're in a small group, you're in a small group.
Right, but the more students that we have in the classroom, the harder it is for the teacher to maintain 6 feet distance just because of the square footage. So I want to be transparent in saying that I know that some of our seating charts, especially at the high school level, will possibly impact teachers just from doing their general regular teaching job.
Sure, I can believe that. Just probably not double like it would for a student.
Right, correct. And obviously, most of those teachers teach from the front of the classroom. You know, that's an impact as well. You know, where they are when they're providing their instruction.
Right.
You know, it's one of those things. They have to be close enough to somebody who's positive to get traced. It's not just a positive in the classroom. As we've said before, we're really trying to apply a scalpel to this rather than a push broom. And you've seen that with our elementary classes and quarantines as well. We have to have a lot of exposure for us to close a classroom. But when you're talking about taking the possibility of 8 kids out of a high school classroom, you know, based on those seating charts, that's a significant impact that we just need to be aware of.
Yep. And to change subjects a little, Dr. Brown, do you think, I appreciate the chart with the semester grades. Do you think the learning is, and we have grades, but do you think the learning has at all been impacted by the hybrid? I mean, if we were to compare, because this chart compares grades this year to last year, do you think the learning this year to last year is just as comparable?
I think that's a good question, Gary. This is I'll answer it this way. I think initially, yes. I think it took our teachers and our students a while to get used to the hybrid model. But I would say right now, the hybrid model is working better, much better than it did in the beginning of the year. And so to answer your question, I think initially, yes, we took some hits just because it was new and we were learning how to do it. But honestly, I think to the resiliency of our teachers and our students, they're figuring it out. And I would say right now, the hybrid's going better than it ever has.
Right, without question. And don't take this the wrong way. I give nothing but kudos to teachers, students, staff, everyone working on the hybrid model. And I'm sure it's better today than it was yesterday, and certainly better than it was 6 months ago. I guess comparing it though to full in person, and I just got to think having someone in front of you every day is the best option, the best teaching model.
I won't dispute that. I wouldn't dispute that assertion. It's just a matter of, weighing, when you take everything in consideration, what value will you get at what risk? That's the question. That's why we're meeting this morning. So, but I do agree with your assertion, Gary.
Yeah, I think qualitatively, Gary, I think it's a fair and reasonable assertion that, it's best for kids to be full in person. I I actually had a conversation with Buffy a day or two ago about the limitations of drawing too many conclusions about these grade comparisons. Let's, to the credit of our teachers, we've talked about giving grace, across the board. Everybody's dealing with not only working in a pandemic, but living in a pandemic. So I would expect, and I think the grades probably would reflect that there has been some giving grace to our students. I know that from personal experience in my own household, I have witnessed teachers giving. I only have one student that gets actual grades at the secondary level, and he's been giving grace. I do think that that's been more our approach to make sure that kids aren't developing, large gaps in their learning. We've been doing retakes and things like that. But having said that, I think that, teachers are definitely giving grace. So comparing grades this year to the grades last year is probably somewhat limited. When we'll really have a better handle on the impact of learning, Gary, is when we start doing norm reference tests, where we can compare, on a nationally normed test where we were this year compared to last year. ACT will be telling also.
Nope, I agree 100%. And as far as along those lines, I know there's some debate whether or not the state should continue with their MAP or their standardized testing. And for any influence we have at all, I encourage that. I don't think not knowing where we are is helpful, whether it's good news or bad news. I think the test should go on. And I understand it's time from the classroom. Just the same, I think it's valuable data. And along the lines, in addition to grace, you can't test or grade a kid on material that's not yet been covered. So, that's another something to consider when we compare this year's grades to last year's. You're not going to give them a C because you haven't covered the second half of the chapter. You're going to give them a grade on what part of the chapter they've covered. And so in as much as we may be behind in materials, to this point last year compared to this year, that should be another part of our consideration.
I agree with you, Gary. Just to update you and update the whole board on that, the state is moving forward on state assessments, and Dr. Wilson is working with administrators on how we're going to execute that. There's a lot of moving parts with so many kids in remote, but we agree with you, Gary, and we are we are moving forward on that, and so we will have some data relative to what Dr. Reich was speaking of on those assessments.
What are you hearing from teachers regarding being behind in materials?
Sharon, I'll kind of answer it the same way I answered Gary's question. I think I kind of I have and I'm getting my information mostly from administrators, but the teachers and the students are feeling better about what they're doing now than what they were doing before. Okay. And so that's that, as best I can tell you, that's the word on the street. But again, we would love to have all of our kids back full in person, but I do believe that we're starting to hit our stride with this hybrid.
And I'm sure you guys have heard the same thing in expressing concerns about the increase in quarantines going back full time. The concern about being able to participate in activities and athletics, the mental health toll that it takes to be isolated for that amount of time. The other concern that I've heard is the way that students are being taught when they're quarantined, and the frustration there and the lack of support that they're getting. So when they go into a quarantine, I guess my question here is, what is the expectation? Because I've heard from parents who have been notified your child's on quarantine and that's it. So who reaches out to that child? Who makes sure that they're participating? Who tells them how to participate? Is it each teacher? Is it an administrator? Is there a guide somewhere? And then halfway through, nobody's heard from that student. Do we just, I mean, what I'm hearing is nobody's heard from that student and that's it. And from parents who have been through this a couple of times, I talked to a parent the other day who the first time followed up and said, I've heard nothing. No one's contacted us. Please help. The second time they've given up.
Yep.
And that's, to me, my opinion, unacceptable.
Yeah, I'd like to address that, Buffy. So we have a quarantine instruction process. And we've worked hard on that and it's evolved over the year. So if that's happening right now, I need you to tell those parents to call me, because that should not be happening at all. We have a formalized process for when a child goes into quarantine. And if that's not happening, that's my responsibility, and I will make sure that it gets fixed. But that should not be happening.
If I can speak, Buffy, I'm not going to dispute you, but I had a kid on quarantine, and the teachers reached out to him, reached out to us. We had to do some legwork. Yeah, we sent my brother-in-law up there to pick up some stuff for him, and we had to put some effort in ourselves. But for 2 weeks, he was getting stuff and doing stuff. So I don't know if that was a rare occasion with that parent or whatever, because my son had, he had 2 weeks off and didn't really miss much.
And when I had a situation, I had a great experience also. But our problem is that should be across the board.
I agree, right. Buffy. And again, that's my responsibility. So those things that are happening, they need to contact me, and I can help with that.
We need to find out what part of that's not working. Is it coming from the high school, elementary? Because my daughter was quarantined twice, and both times, Mrs. Scanlon, I'm just going to give Seegers kudos. I'm not saying nothing bad, but they did a great job when my daughter was quarantined. So is that coming, Buffy, is that coming from the high school part, middle school?
Yeah, it's secondary. And like I said, I had a great experience also. This is clearly not across the board, but we have to make sure it's not just our children having a good experience. This has to be every child in our district having that experience.
Absolutely.
I can say also, Ben was quarantined and had a good experience. He had an AP class, and the teacher was really good about letting him dial in even on his, on the day he would normally be there, so he could participate, and it was well done.
And I think you guys are doing a very good job of making sure that the students are having their Chromebooks as well. I know that my daughter, they offered her one, but we're fortunate enough that she has her own computer. So I guess it's not a question, but I guess all students have Chromebooks just in case. Right?
Yeah,
or that's not even a question.
It's a little complicated at the elementary, but for the most part, Bobby, yes.
That's what I thought.
We can get kids the Chromebooks at the secondary level. Yes, every child has a Chromebook all the time, but we don't have a full slate of Chromebooks, currently for like everyday use at the elementary, but we can get them to come home if need be, like on inclement weather days.
I didn't think that was an issue, but you never know. But I think you guys are doing a great job. I'm not questioning you guys at all.
Dr. Ike, I know you touched on it, but can you speak any further to vaccinations and what to expect? Sorry to put you on the spot. You don't have to.
No, it's okay. I don't really have much to share. Our health department isn't getting very much of the vaccination, as I alluded to earlier, of the vaccine. We are attempting to work with North Kansas City Hospital. We sent out an email yesterday, which was basically served as a sign up for our teachers to get quarantined. And I'm going to address this on a high level. Jen, please fill in the blanks.
Get vaccinated, not quarantined.
I'm sorry, vaccinated. It's early.
Gotcha.
And I'm trying to get Grayson's lunch made and breakfast and out and get him off the door at the same time. So I apologize. We sent on a sign up sheet yesterday. We're attempting to work with North Kansas City. At this time, all indication is that we will be working with North Kansas City. They hear on Sundays when they how much of the vaccine they will receive, and then they contact us, and they're telling us that they can vaccinate our entire staff in one day. That's where it is right now. We don't know when exactly we will be called, but we do have a partner as of right now. And we do have a couple other leads that we're working through. It's kind of a Wild West rollout in that every district is kind of looking for a partner because our health departments just aren't getting very much of the vaccine. So we're all districts are just trying to find any healthcare provider or pharmacy that will partner with us. And right now, our partner our number one partner looks like it's North Kansas City. Jen, you want to fill in the blanks there?
I just think the Wild West analogy is very apt. We are contacting anybody and everybody and trying to make sure that the information we're collecting from our employees, that we can pivot to anybody who wants to help us. While we're doing that, I think the important thing to note is that so is everyone else. So that it's something like this shouldn't feel competitive, but it does. And so we're just putting all of our feelers out there and trying to maintain all of those relationships to see who can, when they receive vaccine, actually get the vaccine. The way that it flows will not give us a huge amount of lead time to deploy the process. But the folks that we're working with are trying to work with are big enough that I think that they can manage our staff in a day. So we would be looking at a 21-day difference between vaccination 1 and 2. If Pfizer is what our partner receives, and 28 days if it's Moderna. Right now, they're all battling for the same vaccine, and districts are all battling to try to find a partner to work with. Clay County is a little bit ahead. They are looking at 65 and older, with Platte County, as Dr. Ike said, looked at 90 and older this week. And we have communicated with our staff who do meet the criteria being over 65 for some alternate ways for them to get the vaccine, if they're seeking that rather than waiting on us.
There are several regional events, so if you do qualify, I'm assuming you're sending that out and sharing that.
I've shared that with the folks that qualify for that. They fill up incredibly quickly. What I've heard from several of our staff is trying to find that is a full-time job. And they're on multiple lists and waiting for something to come through.
We did do a kind of a first run survey to see how many of our staff members would be interested, and we were right around 80%.
Yeah, 80% of those who responded.
Oh, you're not making it a requirement though, right? Okay.
Nope. Not a requirement. And we are providing, obviously, leave to be able to do that. Right now, for our interest survey that closed last week, we had 520 folks who responded. 80% of those said yes, 10% of those said maybe. Right now, from the registration form that I pushed out last night, I have 354 respondents. And those are, if you're signing up for this, you want it. So we could consider all of those to be yeses currently. And that hasn't been out there for 24 hours.
Did we discuss accommodations if you decline the vaccination?
Talk to me a little bit more about what you mean about accommodations.
Well, if you are then quarantined or get sick and you declined the vaccination.
So even if you receive the vaccination right now, the CDC states that you would still need to be quarantined if you were exposed.
Right.
We
No, I
would
mean, as
still
far
be
as accommodation as of HR policy.
Oh, yeah, I would defer to Rob on that, but right now, I think we are continuing to provide the leave, even though that expired in December.
Right, but they haven't had an option to be quarantined, to be vaccinated yet either. I know we have, I know we're facing that at work right now, a similar situation. So if people understand, then it may influence their decision to get vaccinated or not.
Dr. Gardner, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, understand, or at least attempt to understand, are you saying it would be the board's desire to remove that district paid leave if employees chose not to get vaccinated? Is that what you're?
My question is, yeah, did we discuss that when we asked people? We asked people, do you want to get vaccinated or not? Do you understand if you don't and you get sick, that's a choice you've made? I'm not saying we do or don't. I'm asking if that was communicated, and I think the answer is no.
We did not make that statement or ask. We asked our staff who was interested if we could get the vaccine, and if so, fill out the form. That's what we asked our staff to do.
Okay.
I know Dr. Gardner's involved with and is outside of a pandemic, but collaborates with HR professionals across the metro. And these are the type of topics that are frequently discussed. So we'll try to keep a finger on the pulse of how this impacts HR policy across the metro as well.
I was going to say we probably ought to reach out to, council on that, because there's going to be some HR implications if we are saying that.
Well, I would think that, I'll speak hypothetically. Let's say a person declines the vaccination and gets COVID, but he catches the COVID from a person that had the vaccine. I don't think we can.
I don't know that we are at high level enough to really.
Right.
Whether or not I think that's probably better left to council or healthcare professionals. I do have a question. I know this might be premature, but as we're talking about a mass vaccination day, is there any conversation about, first of all, if it's a school day and we're having vaccines all day, having the staff go out, they're probably gonna have to go somewhere else. And, knowing that there's usually some side effects to a number, I don't know what the percentage is off the top of my head, of people. What are we looking at when we do have those, if we do have those mass vaccination days?
Yeah. So if we are in the position where we're having our entire staff vaccinated one day, we are going to have to do some kind of a virtual day or AMIX or a snow day if we are willing to make it up. So there's no way for us to continue regular operation if we're getting everybody vaccinated in one day. We're really trying to get, if we have any control over this, and this is, this is in large part up to our partner healthcare provider, but we're really hopeful that we can do vaccine one on a Friday and maybe have the second one on a no school day. To the extent that we can control it, we're going to try to do this with the least disruption to our regular operation as possible. But the challenge will be that we may not be in full control of that. So we are, like I said, if we're doing vaccine one on a regular school day, and all 600 of our employees are going to be commuting back and forth between their work location and North Kansas City, it will be it would not be possible for us to have a regular day. So we're discussing that right now. I don't know exactly what that looks like, and again, until we hear from North Kansas City Hospital, we don't know exactly what we're dealing with, but we're having those conversations.
And with that, we would have around 3 to 5 days notice. Our staff would have 3 to 5 days notice. So we would, be ready to deploy communication to our parents if that were the case with that level of notice as well.
The approach I've been taking is if we can get our staff vaccinated, we're willing to do just about whatever we have to do to make that happen. We want to provide that opportunity for our staff. We think it helps us, even though they still have to be quarantined. We want to make sure that when our staff has the ability to get vaccinated, that we take care of that. And while I don't love doing a virtual day to get it done, if we can knock out our entire staff in one day and get them vaccinated, I think that's what we ought to do.
Any further questions or discussion? Well, I believe at this time, the plan would be, unless we make a motion to do otherwise, to stay hybrid at the secondary level until our next board meeting when we had this conversation again. Vicki, correct me if I'm wrong there, unless someone wants to make a motion otherwise.
I'm in favor of starting the plans. I mean, let's plan to go back February 1st.
I'm with that.
Wait, what do you mean March 1st?
I'm sorry, March 1st. Yeah. Isn't that where we left it? Or because we can't do it any sooner at this point. Is that right?
Right.
That would give us the time necessary to make final preparations.
Is there a motion to set the next return to full in-person date?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we need to set the motion. What is the motion?
I'll make a motion that we go back to full time in March.
Gary, is that what you second?
Yes, I second.
Okay.
And are we saying March 1st?
Yes, ma'am.
March 1st is a Monday. Is that a good day for you guys, Mike?
I don't see any additional complications with it being a Monday. Any other staff members have any concerns with that? The fact that that's a Monday?
No, sir. Monday would probably be best.
And is that the date we had pushed it to last month? I'm sorry, at our last school board meeting.
Well, we didn't really, that was the date that I threw out. I don't know that we really made a recommendation or took any sort of action. The conversation went in the direction of let's touch base every couple of weeks and consider the return. So, but that March 1st was the date that we had mentioned in the last board meeting. So yes.
Okay. And I guess my thought is if we don't, well, maybe I don't know. Are we at the discussion phase, Buffy?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. My thought is right now the trends are better, which I'm surprised at because I was on the Mark thing on Monday, which they only update once a week that I can see anyway, at least the website I'm accessing. It was really bad for Platte County. We'd turned the wrong direction. And so I'd done a lot of regressions, picking an endpoint to get to the 10% positivity, and it wasn't encouraging. So I'm glad things look better. And I guess I'm kind of where we were at the last board meeting. If all we do is wait till we get to the 10%, then we're not going to get there before the end of the year. But if we can forecast and say, hey, it's better now, and we expect that trend to continue, then I think I'm willing to. I guess my bet is that it's worth it. And and I guess what was unknown at the last board meeting is whether or not the health department would support us. And I thought I heard that they would support us returning to full time in person.
They would, Gary, with the data where it is right now. The data is remarkably similar to when we made the announcement that we would return. I think it was the October board meeting. So we're at like 18% positivity rate in Platte County, which is about identical to where we were in October. They do support. I will formalize that following this. I do have their verbal support, but I'll send an email with our plans to reopen, and I will get their confirmation just to have that in hand. But they have indicated that they would support a full return.
Hey, if I could, I'm on the record as saying, yeah, before March 1st. My fear is we go back March 1st and we start having, major contact tracings. We have a couple of schools get below that 80% attendance rate. How does that affect us with the state and everything else? That's what my fear is. We have a situation like that pop up and we get below that 80% attendance rate. So, you can't predict that, but if it does happen, that's a risk. We're taking a pretty big risk here, I feel like.
Well, that's in-person attendance rate, though. It would not necessarily affect virtual attendance rate, correct? So overall.
Wouldn't someone that's virtually attending while quarantined, wouldn't that still go towards our positive attendance? Now, I don't know how you track that, but I don't know how we track it today.
Yeah, Andy, do you want to speak to that? If we put an entire building in virtual, we would still carry on with instruction, and their average daily attendance would still be counted. Andy, you want to elaborate on that?
Basically, what Dr. Reich said is correct. We can put an individual building into a situation where they're learning all virtually. In those situations, the student attendance rate is calculated by their actual seat time. So the 10 school days where we're virtual, those don't count positively or negatively towards our attendance percentage, but rather we look at the attendance percentage that they had while the building was scheduled to be in person. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you. That helped ease my thoughts a little bit then.
Yeah, my concern isn't really with the state or attendance. It's just more with disruption in learning, and also, our extra and co-curricular activities are a big part of what we do, and the disruption to their participation has been something that has been very difficult for our students and families. And what the right decision is, I can't tell you I know any better than any of you, but I can share that has been difficult for our student athletes and our families, and not just athletes, but students that are participating in extracurricular activities and co-activities as well.
And I know this question has come up previously, but with that though, when we made the decision at the October time to come back full in person, this is not the first time we've discussed this. Did that change? I mean, but they still chose to come back. They had the chance at that time to go remote, correct? To choose remote, and would have made the choice to still go. So yes, I've heard that too, and I know that's a concern, but wouldn't they be remote if our numbers are the same as they were in October and they chose still to go in person?
It's a little more complicated than that, because
Okay.
what has happened, Buffy, and I'll just be really transparent, is that in the fall, a lot of those families and student athletes made their own decision. They didn't go remote. They just didn't come to school. And that causes problems as well, because they knew if they went remote, they'd have to stay remote. And so it was almost like a self-quarantine process. and that caused a pretty significant disruption to the instruction and the learning that was going on. So that is a concern here as we get into March, and you know, we have a lot of kids that do a lot of things after school, not just athletics, but you know, work and whatnot, and it's really important to them. And getting quarantined is you know, is almost like a bigger fear than anything else to them. So that's kind of the complication with it.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Dr. Wright, you mind if I make a comment here?
I don't mind. We probably ought to ask the chair though.
Madam
Go
President.
for it. Go for it.
Thank you. So I would, if the board approves a target return date of March 1st, I would highly encourage us to still have a discussion and take a careful look at our February 18th meeting. One of the things that was mentioned with our health department the other day was that they're really trying to track these virus variants, and they're starting to show up in other areas of different countries, and as well as some even here in the United States. They mentioned that Illinois is the closest region to us that they've identified some variants of the virus. And if you remember in November, when we started seeing our spikes, you know, we really got into a workforce issue with our ability to keep classrooms full with teachers. So I just would encourage we still watch this carefully and have a further discussion on the 18th would be my recommendation.
Well, and I even thought about that with the 18th. That gives us roughly a week and a half before that March 1st. So my question, and I don't want to meet, you know, too frequently and make this a volatile situation, but I think maybe it would be wise to even revisit this next week. That would give you then 2.5 weeks to pivot if needed with our involvement. You guys can obviously pivot as you see fit also, but with our input, I think we should probably continue this discussion weekly until that point to make sure that we are reflecting the environment as it happens.
And I think as we make our decision this morning, we need to go back and revisit what Jennifer had said about redoubling the amount of students that a person who has COVID is affecting in the seating chart in the high school and middle school classrooms too. I think we have to look at the possible negative effects of that.
Yep. Are there any other? Go ahead.
Well, I agree,
Gary.
Buffy. I fully support being flexible in the approach, and so if we want to amend that says, you know, our target is the 1st, but we will adjust. We'll continue to meet weekly or biweekly or however often we need to. I fully support a target that can be adjusted.
I think I would suggest that we meet at least weekly until this date so that we are reflecting, the current day's activities and events. And also, you know, a lot of us are going to get parent feedback as another date is set that should be taken into consideration also.
Right. And right now, though, I don't think anything in the paper should look different. I mean, we said at our last board meeting, March 1st, and we're continuing to say March 1st.
Go ahead.
Can I make a suggestion that I think what I'm hearing you suggest is that we have a board touch point weekly. It would work well in our schedule if we did that on a Friday morning. We have a standing meeting with the health department every Thursday morning, and that would allow us to have that discussion with the health department prior to, talking with the board.
That's fine by me.
I support that.
Yeah, that's good. So I think the motion should be target March 1st, but we meet weekly until then. We can adjust at that time, if we need to.
Are there any further questions, discussion before we take the vote?
I
Do
might
we need to make that an amendment? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
You and I were thinking along the same lines. I would suggest that Bobby and Gary retract their motion in second, and then have just restate it entirely.
Okay. Vicky, do they need to formally retract that?
I have done that based upon, so I'm assuming Gary and Bobby, if you will just say yes, that you'd like to retract that.
Yes, please retract.
And what I heard was the motion would be to set a target date of return to full in-person as of March 1st, and continue to meet weekly to discuss the data.
So moved.
Can the two of you, confirm that?
Gary just made a motion.
I'll second if I need to, or is it going to be, does it have to
Well,
be?
it's got to be me. It's got to be me. But my concern is
no.
Okay.
I don't think it does.
It doesn't have to be Bobby.
Well, since I made the motion, I'll second it.
Okay.
My concern.
any-
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Buffy.
Well, I was going to ask, is there any further questions or discussion? So go for it.
My concern is I've asked this again and I forgot, but I see on the remote side in the high school is we have a 38, 39, almost 39%, I would call it failing rate. That's what I'm more concerned about. I just think that we need to give this a chance for full time, because I think the kids need it. Some of them definitely need it. So,
well, there's two things to consider here. The remote learners are not coming back to full in person. They would remain remote. So we are moving hybrid learners to full in person. The remote learners will still have that option available to them. The other thing to consider, and I think Dr. Wright or Dr. Brown maybe brought this up, is, to read that data just as is, there are a lot of factors that factor into that. I'm not sure that it's just a clean, this is failing. Obviously, we don't love it.
Yeah.
It needs attention. We don't want any student to be in that boat. But this decision would not affect that anyway. This decision is not moving those children to full in person.
All right. We'll give it another week with the numbers and stuff. I'm good with that.
I have a question about hybrid. You have a hybrid learner, and when they're going back to full-time face-to-face, do they have the option of going full-time online?
Yeah, Sharon. So how I would like to do it, and this is obviously open for discussion. I would not have a formal declaration period again. Anybody that any child or family that is wishing to go remote would just contact me on an individual basis, and we would work through that. I'm open to doing that differently, but it would take longer with a formal declaration period than it would be to kind of take those on an individual basis. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. Will you communicate? Will that be communicated, do you think?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And those, the remote learners that are not doing very good, is there a way we can reach out to them? Because, God, I'm so concerned about them failing, because good Lord, that's a percentage. I wish they would reconsider about going back to at least going back to hybrid.
So,
something that Dr. Wright, well, go ahead, Dr. Brown. I think.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to address Bobby. We do have some, we have sent letters to some of those children that are doing poorly in remote, Bobby, and Dr. Duff has reached out to those families. We've had individual conferences with some of them. So please understand that we are having some interventions with those students. It's not, we're just not letting it go. So we do have some interventions in place. I'm sorry, Buffy.
No, I think the conversation about the grades earlier, we don't know, how they did last year, but comparably we're doing this similar to last year. So, is it the learning modality, or is it just simply where the learners are and were? You guys can speak better to that than I can, but
Yeah, I think, and this is just, a theory. I think I guess an educated one. The student, it could be that we have a higher concentration of students in virtual that weren't engaging even before we went to virtual. So the same students that would have been in school but not engaging, this isn't every student that's in the virtual learning modality, but there may be a higher concentration of students that wouldn't have engaged fully even if we were full in person. So it's hard to draw too many conclusions about how well our virtual learners are doing because they may have been doing poorly if we were full in person. And we would be doing the same things that we're doing in the virtual scenario. We're reaching out and trying to find ways to get them to engage.
Is there a way to pull data from last year prior to going to virtual to compare how these students had been doing last year to what they're doing now?
Yeah, yes, Sharon. So when Dr. Duff communicates with those families and when they have those intervention meetings, all of the data from what that child has done is looked at and can and trying to help. But Dr. Reich's completely right. It's so different for every child. You can't paint it with a broad brush. Every child has his own educational journey, and he's right. We look at them in the remote world just like we would in the in-person world. We do what we can to help them.
Isn't that what table 1 kind of tells us, that in total, the total population of hybrid and virtual is about the same this year to last year, a little worse, maybe. I mean, if you look at 9 through 12, 19 to 20 and 20 to 21, they're both 49%, 23 versus 21, 13, 13.
Exactly, Gary.
Yeah. Yep. We're looking at, as a whole, we're looking the same. It's just when you break out certain learners that we look different. We didn't break those out last year. So they might look the same if we did break them out.
Good point.
Any further questions, discussion? If not, I think we're probably ready to take a vote unless anyone wants anything further.
I believe you should all have your vote buttons up.
Motion carried.
So motion's carried. So we will look to a March 1st return. We will meet with the health department weekly on Thursdays, as our standing meeting is already on the calendar. And then Vicki will set up meetings for Friday mornings at 7:30.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Starting this coming Friday, correct?
That would be tomorrow.
Not tomorrow, I
Oh,
don't think.
okay. Gee, many Christmas week's already over?
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you all.
All right, please vote. We are adjourned. Have a